Sometimes quickly, sometimes slowly. Non-alcoholic? Thank you for that heartfelt, somewhat adequate introduction. So much emotion, I can barely contain myself. Delighted to be here. What a great weekend, and basking in the gift of sobriety with all of you. Thank you for everyone that took the time to say hello and be so welcoming. You know, you need to understand that I'm just an AA member who happens to get the opportunity to do this every now and then. I'm my piece of dirt in my home group. I'm busy. I'm active. I have a commitment at the district level. I'm just a meat and potatoes AA guy, and I get weird when you take me out of my home base. And I've always felt comfortable in Alcoholics Anonymous because I'll arrive at a place like this weird. And then you start talking to me and you start telling me your story, and we exchange little tidbits of information. And I realize that people in Dallas are just as sick as they are in Bellingham, Washington, and I'm just delighted to be here. And so I can't stress enough how happy I am to get the opportunity to do anything with my dear friend Bob, you know, and particularly something like this. But I also I can't stress enough how little preparation we put into this. And because Bob's one of those spiritual guys that say if you prepare too much, you edge God out. And he's proven that to me time and time again, because we don't really, you know, what are we going to do? I don't know. You go first, you know. It's like, that's the planning. And but what we're going to do is about 20 minutes so each. We're going to use the 10th and the 11th step as a loose format. It will be not a technical presentation. More interested in what it looks like in our lives today. It's like, we can tell you what it says in the book, and you've got the book. You know what it says. But what does that look like in your life? How does it show up in your life? If the 12 steps are a set of principles, spiritual in nature, when practice is a way of life, which is what we're supposed to be doing, right? This isn't one and done. We don't get our little alcoholic diploma and say, skip down the road. These are supposed to be brought into our life. The steps aren't built in an ascending manner. They're in a circle, and around we go. You know, all the steps have to be alive in my life today. So what does that look like? And so I'm going to tell you a few stories about that. You know, I went through the steps and I found myself, you know, now I'll tell you what the 10th step looks like for me. That's a moment by moment opportunity to have what we refer to as a conscious contact with a power greater than myself. Now, does that mean when that contact is severed, all heck breaks loose? No, not necessarily. But if I stay severed long enough, my character defects start running the show. My ego starts running the show. I start playing God sometimes in very subtle manners, really not even perceptible to people around me, because it seems to be the human condition, but it's nothing less than playing God. I'll give you an example. Here's one of the most subtle ways I play God continuously. I complain. And if you think about a guy like me with a story like mine, from where I came from to where I'm at, you would think I'd never have a bad day, but I do. And you would think I'd never complain, but I do. If there was an Olympic sport in Alcoholics Anonymous, it would be complaining. We are world-class complainers. And what am I really doing? How is that playing God? Isn't complaining just a form of saying this person, place, or thing should not be the way it is at that particular moment? While the spirit of the third step, the spirit, is that I've really turned my will and life over to the care of God, and none of it's really my business. What's my business? It's God's business. It's helping him and his kids. Do I conduct myself that way? Well, my actions might line up with that much more than my heart lines up with that. Much more than my thought life lines up with that. And that's where I get into trouble. You know, and one of the least explored areas, I think, of our recovery is our thought life. And that's understandable. When we're new, we're so nuts. What do they say? Doesn't matter what you think, doesn't matter what you feel, it matters what you do. And that is great. And I fell in love with taking the right actions. And I would hear things in AA that I liked, like, nobody ever went to jail for thinking about robbing a bank. And I go, yeah, that makes sense. And then one day it hit me, yeah, but nobody robbed a bank without thinking about it first, you know, and you start to realize I can't have that stream of garbage in my head, that complaining, that malcontent, dress it up in spiritual language when I'm in AA and wonder why I don't feel good at night. I was about 10 years sober. My wife Eileen and I, we were both low-bottom drunks, had a lot of wreckage. We cleaned up our wreckage. At about 9 years sober, I'm out of debt. We buy our first house. It's the worst house on the street, right? It's a fixer. It's all we could afford, but we were delighted to have it, right? And so we worked on this house nonstop for 5 years until we sold it and moved up to Bellingham in the Pacific Northwest. And this one particular Saturday, what was on the books that day is I was going to go into a dilapidated garage on the property, and I was going to sheet the inside of it with plywood. And so I'd stopped at Home Depot and loaded all the plywood up the night before. And while I was there, over in the tool rack, I could see this one hammer. It was like calling my name, Don. It was just beautiful. And guys that are into tools know what I'm talking about. I was drawn to it. It was a 24-ounce Vaughan framing hammer. And it had great balance. And I've got it in my hand. I remember thinking, I would look good swinging this, and I bought the hammer. So the next day, I'm out in the garage, and I'm installing the plywood, and my wife Eileen's with me. We're having a great time, and the music's playing, and we're young, and we're in love, and we've got this fixer house, and we just feel the nearness of our Creator. And I'm setting these 8-penny nails in this half-inch CDX plywood, ba-ba-bam, ba-ba-bam, and I'm thinking, man, I'm good, ba-ba-bam. And at one point, I mishit a nail on the hammerhead, this brand new Vaughan framing hammerhead with that brand new sharp waffle at the end of it. Banged off the nail, and it hit this thumb dead center that was holding the plywood up, and my thumb just exploded in a rooster tail of blood. And I do what I do when I blow up my thumb with a 24-ounce Vaughan framing hammer. I started cursing in a language I didn't know I knew. I was making up profanity loudly. I started spinning in a 360-degree circle and kicking everything in that radius as hard as I possibly could while I kicked. I did that for about 30 seconds. And then I stopped. And I got some duct tape and I wrapped up my thumb. And I went back to work, because that's what you do. And now I notice there's a change in the environment. A cold front has moved in. And I look over at my wife, and she's got that look on her face. I've seen it before, like she just bit into a lemon. And I said something very spiritual, like, what? And she said, And I said, well, obviously something's bothering you. What is it? And she said this. She goes, well, I've said it 100 times. You're 6'5", you're 280 pounds, and you're loud as a freight train. And when you lose your temper, you can tell me that you're not mad at me, but it terrifies me. But you won't stop doing it. And I dropped my hammer on the ground, and I said, you must be kidding me. Do you not see the trail of blood on the plywood? Did you not see what I did to my thumb? You know what your problem is, Eileen? You don't want a man. You want a little boy. You want somebody you can boss around. You know what? Let's go to the meeting tonight, and when we get to the meeting tonight, pick 10 men randomly. I won't even tell you who to pick. And ask them what they do when they blow their thumb up with a hammer. If they're a real man, they'll tell you they cuss and they kick stuff. You're ridiculous. And I storm out. And now I'm in my office in the house, pacing back and forth, arguing with my wife who's still out in the garage. And why did I marry you? How did I end up with this mean woman? And from somewhere in the back of my mind, I hear my sponsor's voice. This would be a good time for a 10th step. And the catalyst for the 10th step for me on a daily basis is emotional disturbance. What am I? Am I angry? Am I lonely? Am I anxious? Am I judgmental? Am I fault-finding? What's going on? But I can't do a 10-step. Why? Because I'm too upset. I'm too upset. And you can't do a 10-step when you're upset. Your first priority is to calm down, because you can't access God when you're angry. So I do some breathing exercises. I sit down, I get my heart rate down, I calm down enough, and I start running it through my head, which is a variation of the columns in the 4-step. What did she say? What did she say? I've told you 100 times. Is that true, Don? She told you 100 times? I think we'd all agree 100 is kind of a big number. I don't know if it's 100, but it's a lot. It's a lot. What did she say? She said, I terrify her. Hey, Don, do you want to terrify your wife? No, man. If there's a place on the planet I want my wife to feel the safest, it's when she's standing right next to me. Well, if she said it to you a lot, and she said you terrify her, and she brings you that truth and you haven't taken any action on it, isn't that a non-subtle way of calling her a liar? Is your wife a liar, Don? Oh, no, man. She is the most honest person I know. I swear to God, there's times I wish she would lie. She can't lie. I have to work not to lie. It's natural for her. Well, if she's not a liar and you don't want to terrify her and she's brought to you all these times, why haven't you done anything? I just didn't believe her. I just thought she's overreacting. I just thought she's being dramatic. Well, Don, now that you know all this, what action are you going to take? It's very obvious to me I need to go make amends. So I walk outside and I say to my wife, I need to talk to you. She says, I don't want to talk to you. And I said, I don't blame you. And I said, I just need 5 minutes. I want to make amends. And she goes, you got 5 minutes. And I told her what I just told you. I said, baby, you've told me this 100 times, and you've told me it's terrified you, and I've ignored you when you've brought me the truth. And I know that must have made you feel like I was calling you a liar. And you're not a liar, baby. You're the most honest person I know, and I don't want you to be afraid of me. But I've always been this way. I've always had this temper, and I can't tell you that I can just stop on a dime and it'll never happen again, but I can promise you this. I'm bringing it to God. I'm bringing it to my sponsor. I'm going to make it a spiritual piece of business, and I promise you, I'm not taking this lightly. And she looked at me, and she gave me this sweet kiss on the cheek, and she said, that's all I've ever wanted. And the sun comes out, and we can hear the music again, and we're back in love. And 2 hours later, I've got the inside of the garage sheeted, and I've hung shelves up, and she's done all this planning. We're having a great time, and I'm so grateful to be in AA. I'm so grateful for the steps, and I'm kind of a pack rat, and I got these boxes of quarts of paint, and I'm shoving these quarts of paint onto the shelves, and I don't realize that one shelf is completely full, and as I shove this quart of paint in, a full quart of paint falls, and I don't see it till it's just about to land on the top of my sandal-clad foot, right on top of your small bones, and it lands with a thud. Bang! And I made an involuntary noise. I went, oh! And I turned to my wife, and her eyes are big like saucers, and I said, you can't believe how bad this hurts. This is like pain you can taste. And she laughed, and I laughed, and I didn't realize there was another way to do it. We talk a lot in Alcoholics Anonymous about change and transformation. Turns out the main ingredient in change or transformation is I first have to be wrong about something at one time I thought I was right about. And more importantly, in the fifth step, what it tells me, there's a warning in the fifth step on why we do it. And it says we usually find a solitary self-appraisal insufficient. How transparent am I living in my life? Am I including the people in my life, in my relationships, my employer, my wife, my sponsees, my spiritual advisors, my sponsor? Do they see me in a transparent manner? Or am I the guy that's 34 years sober now that I know? I mean, it's great to be 34 years sober. You know what the bad part is? I know stuff. Just ask me. And it can be a real block to new information. It can be a block to involving the people. I think I know how you feel about what you're experiencing with me. And I don't. I learned that in the amends process, didn't I? When you created an environment of safety and honesty and people could finally tell you how you affected them and you didn't know, you're like, I didn't know that I hurt you that way. I have to find a way to bring people into my life because they will supply the information I need to take to God and to my sponsor. It's not going to come from here. My perception is always going to be clouded by my veil of wants, fears, and desires. So, things I do with my wife today. Here's a fun one. I started doing this many years ago, and it sounded like a good idea at the time, but didn't turn out to be. A little exercise, and it helps you find out where your partners are at. And then it's like, what does this have to do with AA? Everything. The variation on the 10th step. And I walked up to my wife and I said, hey, let's do this little thing, exercise. She said, sure. I said, on a scale of 1 to 10, give me a number. Rate me. And no hesitation. She had a number just like that. Not the number I was thinking of. And I said, controlling my facial reaction, well, if I am a 7, as you say, how would I become an 8? You know what she said? No hesitation. She said, it'd be nice if you looked at me when I talked to you. Here's my intellectual reaction to that. That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. Of course I look at her when she talks to me, but I don't say that. I'm trying to get along. I said, okay, I'll make it a spiritual piece of business, blah, blah, blah. A couple weeks later, we're on the couch. She's talking to me about something that's very important to her. I don't know what. She's going on and on and on. But I remember this, man, so I am locked in, man, eyes locked in. And she's going and going, and if we hit about 10 minutes, man, my head starts to tremble and come over here, and I got to bring my head back, and then it goes up here, and I got to bring my head. I hit such a level of discomfort looking at my wife when she was talking to me that I would have rather looked at the blazing sun with naked eyes than continue to look at her. And I thought to myself, oh my God, if I'm this wrong about that, what else am I wrong about? Everything. And what I've done in my employment, what I've done with the guys that work for me, what I've done with my sponsees, what I've done with my friends is called spiritual consent. I've created an environment of safety and honesty to involve people in my 10th step that can see me clearly, that can see me in 3D, that can see me as I'm at, and go, what do you see? What's your perception? This is mine. And they've supplied information I never could have got on my own. And I'll tell you, this is what a 10th step looks like if you're spiritually fit and you make a mistake and you can clean it up and change your life like that. So my wife walks up to me one day and she says, just curious, not trying to start anything here. By the way, when your wife says, I'm not trying to start anything here, they're about to start some stuff, just so you know. And she said, do you ever plan on making the bed? Now, we've been married for 20 years at this point. And you know, other men have been asked that question in the history of marriage, but I'm proud to say I think I gave the dumbest answer anyone's ever given. I said, I thought you'd like making the bed. She said, nobody likes making the bed. If you're spiritually fit, your response to that might be this. Would you like me to make the bed? And she said, that'd be great. And if you meet Eileen, feel free to ask her. If she's not in it, every day I make the bed if I'm at home. And the adjustment, now this is important, the adjustment I had to make was about this big. It was no big deal to me. But I was completely unconscious this was a problem for her. I've had those kind of discoveries in the workplace with sponsees because I asked the question. It's great to ask yourself, how am I doing? You decide when these character defects crop up. You decide when you need to make amends. You decide if you've hurt somebody. Very dangerous, that solitary self-appraisal. I want to talk briefly about the 11th step and turn it over to Bob. I'll tell you what, if you had a picture that you could show me, a little movie, if you will, of a guy that had prototype, beautiful morning prayer meditation. You know what I mean? Visualize it, right? He's got a sunroom. There's a gong. Spiritual literature all out. You can smell incense in the air. He's sitting in the lotus position. He looks surrendered from a distance. It's amazing. And he's just like, he's levitating. And you go, now that's some good, look at that. That's some good prayer and meditation. Give me that guy or give me a guy that gets up in the morning, says good morning to God and means it, says, please show me what your will is today, and then has a strong conscious contact all day long. Give me the guy with the conscious contact. Here's why. I've never gotten any real trouble praying on my knees next to my bed in the morning. That's not where my life is lived. Now, I believe in the ritual of prayer and meditation in the morning, and I do it. But I believe that prepares me to continue that throughout my day. A constant conscious contact with God. But how do you do that? Life is so busy. It's so distracting. There's so many people out there doing people stuff. They upset us. Second step talks about what cuts me off from God. Pomp, circumstance, worship of other things. Can happen every day. We have schedules to meet, kids to pick up, bills to pay, cars to fix. It's so distracting. How do we do it? And I'll tell you what I do. I've had the same job for 20 years. So I'm in a position of authority. It's a blessing in my life. I will tell you that. It's provided a good living for me. I show up at my office and there are men waiting for me because they need their marching orders. And I will walk in the door and they will come at me like fighter jets. Right? Don, Don, Don. And if I'm not spiritually fit, I might sound like this. Whoa, boy, I just got here. Do you not see the briefcase in my hand? Do you not see that I'm not even in the door? How about you let me get to my desk? And maybe sit down even. I don't know. And then I'll drop everything I'm doing and work on your little problem. Would that be all right? And for some reason, that hurts people's feelings. So I don't do that. I get to work, I turn off the rig, and I don't get out of the truck. And I say the same prayer every morning. God, I'm at work and it's a blessing in my life. Thank you for putting this job in my life. And there's men in there that need my help. Let me put their needs ahead of me. Give me eyes to see and a heart to feel. Then I close my eyes and I think about if I really was a servant, if I really was a member of Alcoholics Anonymous, what would that guy look like walking in? It's a huge inconvenience, right? It takes about 30 seconds. And then I walk in the door and nothing changes on there and they come at me like fighter jets. Don, Don, Don. And I'm like, hey boys, good to see you, man. We're going to have a great day. What do you need? Come on, let's figure it out. And what that does is it makes them feel seen, coveted, and important. And they should, because they need to be seen. They need to be coveted, and they are important. We can't do what we do without them. And I'll tell you what, we get along, management and labor, where I work, because we're treating each other as equals. And when I need something from these guys, they never hesitate to give it to me, because they know I respect them, and I treat them with respect. They don't know that's Alcoholics Anonymous showing up in their life. I come home to a home, there's a house on the street, and in that house there's a woman that I love, and in that woman there's a heart that I love like good poetry, and that's my wife, Eileen. And I will profess that to you, but I'll tell you what, I get home after a long day out in the real world slaying dragons, and if I'm not spiritually fit, I'll walk in and she'll want to talk to me about what? I don't know, but she always wants to talk to me about something. You know why? Because I'm her favorite person in the world. She's been waiting all day to talk to me. But if I'm not spiritually fit, I'll walk in and she'll talk, and I'll go, baby, I love you. But I just got home. I don't even have my boots off yet. Can you let me come in, maybe get a cup of coffee and sit down? Then I'll listen to anything you have to say, but just let me get in my own home. Would that be all right? And for some reason, that hurts her feelings. And she'll say something spiritual like, never mind, and go off in the distance as I chase her. No, I'm sorry. And so I don't get out of the truck, man. I sit there and I say, God, I'm at home now, and I got the world hanging all over me, and there's a woman in that house that's a gift in my life, and I'm so grateful that you put Eileen in my life. Let me put her needs ahead of mine. Give me eyes to see and a heart to feel. And then I meditate. If I really loved her as much as I say I love her, what would that look like? What would that guy look like coming through the front door? And when I can see it, I can do it, and I walk in. Baby, where are you? Tell me about your day. And I put her needs ahead of mine, and it's a huge inconvenience. Like 10 minutes, and change the whole dynamic and environment of our home. I show up at AA at night, and I got no business getting out of the truck, right? I'm driving to the meeting, and I'm thinking about what I'm going to have for dinner when I get home. I'm driving to the meeting, and I'm thinking about what I have to do at work the next day. I'm getting ready to check a box of something that's the most important thing in my life, like it's nothing. I'm not ready to go to AA. I park in that parking lot, and if I'm not spiritually fit, I'll walk right by the new guys, right by the people in the parking lot, go get my coffee, go find my little buddies, go talk about that. When I get my stuff downloaded, maybe if there's any time left, I'll say hi to a newcomer, pass my hands over the crowd. Got no business getting out of the truck. So I don't. I say the same prayer when I show up at AA. God, I'm in a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. It's just another gift in an endless series of gifts. But for all I know, this is the most important moment of somebody's life. And I don't want to miss it, God, but I got the world hanging all over me. But I'm going to take all my problems and leave them in the front of this truck. I know you'll take good care of them. But give me eyes to see. Give me a heart to feel. Let me remember what it was like to be new. And I meditate on what it was like to be new. How every night was touch and go. God, I hope I hear something good tonight. How it meant so much to me when you shook my hand and said, remembered my name. When you invited me to come sit with you. When you saw me. Can I do that for the next guy? And when I can see that, now I can go in and I can shake hands with everybody in the parking lot before I go in, and shake hands with everybody in the stairs, and walk into my home group and shake hands with everybody in the group before I get my coffee, before I talk to my friends, and scan the room and look for people I don't know and introduce myself. I don't think we've met. My name's Don. This is my home group. Are you new? And my link in the chain stays connected. All these things is spiritual preparation. It's very important that I learn that God doesn't have business hours. I can access God anytime I want, but I have to create blocks, stops as I go through my day. And those are just some of the examples of some of the things that I do. I do it in many different ways. I pause. We talk about the pause in the 11th step. What does the pause look like? See, there's a speed of self-will and there's a speed of God's will. Self-will is a reactive speed. God's will, there's a speed, it's contemplative. How do I create a slower speed so I can contemplate what God's will is for me in that situation? Slow down, Don. You got all the time in the world. God's in charge. Everything gets done. Bob?
Father, make me the place where you could shine through, that you and I could be one, not two. Then I need not worry, fret, or plan, for you would use me where and as I am. And if I could be relaxed and free, maybe you'll carry out your plan through me. I'm Bob Darrell. I'm an alcoholic. That was great. I came to Alcoholics Anonymous, and I struggled with the whole spirituality God thing. I was a little bit on the muscle about religion, and it was really because I'm afraid and I'm scared, and I just don't think I can measure up. But my sponsor didn't care how I felt or what I thought. People in AA just really hurts my feelings, but they don't really care about my opinion about things at all, really. But they're care very much about what I do. So my sponsor, I'm not even out of detox, and he's asking me to get down on my knees and pray every morning and pray at night. And I tried to sidestep all that because it's inconvenient, as most valuable spiritual exercises are. And I said, well, I can't do that. I don't believe in God. And he said, I didn't ask you to believe in God. I asked you to pray. I thought, well, if I prayed I don't believe in God, I'd be a hypocrite. And he said, oh, we think you've been a hypocrite all your life. Just do it. And my God, and I woke up to me by working with people. We are hypocrites. Self-absorbed, self-centered, self-serving people like myself. I want to look like I'm a giver. I'll promise you. I'll come over and help you move on Saturday. Absolutely. And then Saturday comes, and if I don't feel like going, my feelings own me, so I don't go. And instead I just come up with some reasonable excuses. And you can bet if I'm defending myself, justifying myself, minimizing the things I do wrong, if I'm doing any of those things, it's not good. I'm in the bondage the book calls of self. So I started to pray. God started showing up in my life. I think there's an unrecognized promise in the second tradition that when we come together for the purpose of recovery, this ultimate authority will express itself through the consciousness of a recovery group of Alcoholics Anonymous. It happens over and over and over again. And it really, over a long period of time like that, it's really how a guy like me who's God-resistant and scared and self-serving and self-obsessed, it's how I could come to believe. Matter of fact, it's the only way. I can't believe because you told me. I mean, I don't do that. I'm not capable of that. First of all, when I first get here, I'm not going to listen to you because you're stupid. I mean, I'm not holding it against you, but I'm not going to listen to you. I think I had ADD before it came out. You know what I mean? And it's not, the implication of ADD is that I have an inability to pay attention. That's not true. If it's something I want, oh my God, I'll pay such obsessive attention. You'll think this guy is the most focused person in the universe. But anything that's not my idea, that's not what I want or not important to me, I just shine it on. So I'm praying in Alcoholics Anonymous, and I started trying to do meditation. And I went to the book, because that's what my sponsor said. Well, just do what's in the book. And I went to the book, and I fancy that I know something about meditation, because back in the day, it was my late teens, early 20s, I did TM, I did Raja Yoga, breathing exercises. I did a whole lot of that stuff because it was hip. Yeah. You know what I mean? I didn't do it to, like we do stuff, to be useful or closer to God. I did it because I could feel spiritually superior to the people who didn't do it. Like, did you ever go up to somebody at a party, you're drinking and smoking a little reefer, and you go, "Excuse me, do you meditate?" And if they say no, I just love that, because I can go and walk away. Right. So what I've done prior to getting to Alcoholics Anonymous is a lot of Eastern spiritual techniques, but AA is not about that. Because in those spiritual approaches, they only serve the person doing it. Alcoholics Anonymous has a spiritual approach to make us more useful and to be able to carry out our primary purpose, which has some sort of other-centeredness, which is difficult for a self-centered person. You're trying to move me off of me and onto you, driven by fear, and now start coming from a place of love, giving up my self-reliance and starting to have a little God-reliance. And so I'm attempting this, but I had some interesting things happen to me. I had the privilege, I guess, to sponsor some clergy over the years. And I remember this one, my first sponsor sponsored this guy for briefly, and he drank again. And his name is Frank, and he was a priest, and he was a good guy. He wasn't one of those deviant priests. He was a good guy. He just lived to serve his church, and I'm working with him because I suspect everybody, when I get him sober and he stays sober, everybody will realize what an amazing AA member I am, you know, because my sponsor failed, and so I go over everything. You know how you do. You do these steps. You have service commitments. You need a home group, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And he has a seemingly reasonable reason why he doesn't have to do that. He doesn't have to have a service commitment in AA. He serves his church and his parish. He doesn't have to do our fourth step and fifth step that's in the book because he has confession. He doesn't need to do a 10th or 11th step because he has confession and his daily office, which is a series of prayers and readings that he does. And the guy has an amazing amount of faith. He calls me up after I've been sponsoring him a little bit, and he's been drinking. It's a sad deal. He's sobbing into the phone. And what he can't understand, and as he tells me about it, I don't get it either. Why here's a man who's devoted his life to serve, in his mind, to serving God and serving his church, and he prays more one day than most of us would pray in a week. He reads a lot of spiritual literature, more than I do. Why does he ask God to keep him sober and he drinks again when he knew from going to some meetings that the dregs of the earth were being kept sober by God in AA? Prostitutes, drug dealers, robbers, I mean horrible people. And if you're sober only through God's grace, I remember thinking this. God, he should have a leg up on a guy like me. And yet the difference is it wasn't that he didn't believe in God. He just couldn't, as I and most of us struggle with, he couldn't access God's grace. There's too much of him in the way. There's too much of me between me and you and me between me and God. And so without the actions of Alcoholics Anonymous, you can have a tremendous amount of faith. It's just shallow because you're the center, whether you want to be or not. And I get that. I used to tell a story. I haven't told this in a long time. Somebody reminded me of it from many years ago. If you come to visit me in August in Las Vegas, it's hot in Las Vegas in August. I mean, the Chamber of Commerce will say it's a dry heat. Yes, so's hell. It's hot. I mean, and if I put you in my car, drive you about 30 minutes outside of town to one of the largest bodies of fresh water in the United States, Lake Mead. Hundreds of miles of shoreline. I take you up to the edge of that lake. You can get out and you can swim in that lake. You can drink the water. Absolute know and experientially that lake exists. I'll put you in my car, I'll take you out in the middle of the desert, maybe 10 miles away from the lake. And I'll let you off, and it's 115 degrees. And if it doesn't matter that you have absolute faith that the lake exists, if you don't find a way to get to that lake, you're going to die of thirst in that desert with absolute faith that the water exists. And that's my problem. It's not enough to believe in God. I have to access his grace. Lack of power is my dilemma. And so we start going into this self-reducing process of the 12 steps that's designed to make me smaller. And as I get smaller, you get closer. And as I get smaller, God and I have a better shot. And so I'm going along doing this stuff. And I remember I was probably 2 years sober, I suppose. I was at an AA retreat, and there was an old-timer in Vegas named Ted Davis. He died a few years ago. He had over 50 years. And Ted was a great member of AA. And I went up to him. My sponsor was busy. He was at the same retreat, but busy talking to some people. And I grabbed Ted, and I said, "Can I talk to you?" And he said, "Yeah." I said, I'm praying. I'm going to a lot of meetings. I'm sponsoring guys. I'm doing all that. And I still am plagued with anxiety. I still often walk around having conversations in my head with people that aren't in the room. I'm like stuck up here. And he said, "Well, you pray?" And I said, "Yes, I do." He said, "You believe in God?" I said, "Absolutely." And then he said something I'd never heard before. He said, "Guys like us can pray and have a lot of faith and still die of alcoholism." And he said, "What we have to have is trust." And I don't know. I must have looked at him like, "What's the difference?" And he said, "I'll tell you the difference between faith and trust. If you went to a circus and you sat in the audience and you watched one of those high wire walkers across the top, that wires strung across the top of the tent, you watch him come out to the platform. And he's pushing a wheelbarrow. And you could sit there in the audience with absolute faith. This guy is a professional. He's walked across that tight wire, I bet 1,000 times. I have absolute faith he can walk across that tight wire. But if you had trust, you'd go up and sit in the wheelbarrow and let him push you across. And when he said that, I got this sinking feeling like, oh, I don't want, I know what he means. Jesus, I don't wait. And I can't oppose that intellectually because I like the idea of getting in the wheelbarrow. Matter of fact, I'll even go to meetings where they're talking about getting in the wheelbarrow. I'll go out to coffee with some of you and we'll discuss the intricacies of being in the wheelbarrow. I'm just not getting in the wheelbarrow. You know what I'm saying? Because I have this fear inside of me, and the fear comes from a deep-seated feeling of not enough, that if I ever got in that wheelbarrow, I'd get about halfway out on that wire and I'd hear that voice. Oh, this is that Bob. And all my life would every sinful thing I've ever done would flash before my eyes. Because the truth is, it's easy for me to talk about trust in God. It's harder to do it. I had a friend who's I haven't seen in 30-some years, I guess. I think he moved away. But he was a pilot. And he used to talk about how Alcoholics Anonymous, the AA, could also stand for altered attitudes. Which, when he said that, the first time he said that, I didn't like it because my whole life people are talking about my bad attitude, you know. And then he explained attitude. He said attitude is the angle of approach. When a pilot's going to land a plane, he sets the attitude. And it's how you approach things. And I thought, oh my God, I have a self-centered fear-based angle of approach mostly. And then he told a story about being in this little plane, I guess a single-engine plane, and he evidently had gone up higher than you're supposed to, above what I think he called it the ceiling you're supposed to go to. And he got up to this and he hit a wind shear, which I'm not sure exactly what that is, but I think it's opposing wind currents, and it spun him into a tailspin. And he was frightened. He said it was the most scary thing. Your emotions are screaming at you that you're going to die. And the impulse to pull back that stick, to try to pull that plane up is overwhelming. And he said, but I've been taught that if I do that, I will crash and die for sure. What I must do is something that it doesn't feel right, but that's necessary. I must push it forward to facilitate the spiraling down. And he said that this plane was made by its maker in such a way that if you push it down and then let go, it rights itself. And that's the way God made it. And I remember thinking, my God, that's unbelievable. I understand. I know exactly what he's talking about. And my problem is the self-centered fear. See, my ego, which generates all that because it wants to control me, my ego has to worry or scare me to own me. And the ego inside of me, my head screams. My spirit whispers. I hear my head a lot easier than I can hear God inside of me. Because when I'm not right spiritually, and so this is such a weird deal to me. The times I need God the most are the times where it's the most difficult to access him internally. So we have a great thing in Alcoholics Anonymous. That's why we have 3 legacies and not just one, is that we have a fellowship that we're not all spiritually sick on the same day. And when I can't access God, because when I go inside, I just run into me, I can call Dawn up. And Dawn's not plagued by my self-centered fear that day. And so Dawn can access for me what I can't access through me inside. And it's all a matter of turning towards the source. One of the things that this thing about the page 86, it starts talking about this 11th step. And the first set of directions, the whole paragraph, is about self-examination. You know, and this doesn't make sense to me. And then when I started doing it, I was sober a long time before I followed the procedure in the book. And I always did something in the morning and at night. But I started looking at this as if this was something I need to incorporate in my life. I remember how one of the great things about sponsoring people and working with newcomers is that you'll tell them something to do that's in the book, and maybe you're not really doing it. But you know you should, and you don't do it, and then you tell them to do it, and they do it, and they get better. It's like, oh, maybe I ought to do that, you know. I don't want anybody getting ahead of me, you know. And so I start doing this stuff, and I start trying to make God's will a piece of business. In the 12 Steps and 12 Traditions, along with the big book, it says the same thing, both places, in the 11th step and in the big book in page 86 and 87, that aligning my will with God's is the proper use of the will. It's an alignment. It's not a worship. It's an alignment. And what does that mean? Well, when my life is in my hands, I got a lot of problems. If you went into every bad situation I've ever been in, drunk or sober, and sometimes sober is worse, and you send a CSI team into that problematic area that I've in my life, I'm telling you, all they're going to find is my DNA and my fingerprints, that I am the source of it. And so if that's true, then what I have to do is I have to get my life out of the hands of this guy that keeps screwing my life up, this idiot that doesn't know any better, and get it and try to give it to God. Well, that's not easy. One of the things that has driven me most of my life is I got this thing inside of me. I don't even know what to call it. I'll call it the wanter. I got something that just wants. And if you ask me, what do you want? I don't know. Yours, different. I just want. And if you're like me and you want, the problem is it lends itself so easily to disappointment and depression because I get what I want and then I don't want it. What is it about me that the shine wears off of stuff the minute it's mine? The excitement and the thrill is in the acquisition. And I don't know what that is. And it's caused me a lot of problems in my life. Dissatisfaction, depression. And the book says, aligning my will with God's is the proper use of the will. So if I can't stop wanting, what am I to do? Is I got to want what God wants. It's a realignment of my will to change my wants to something that's not of me or is to God's will. Now, we don't know what God's will is. I think I do sometimes, but I've had a lot of weird thoughts in my life. There's a great line in step 11. It talks about if we presume or fancy, if I presume to be inspired, I'm going to pay for that presumption and all sorts of absurd actions and ideas. I remember my first time this really came home to me. I was about a little over a year sober, and I met this girl. Every weird story in AA starts out with, and I met this girl. You know what I mean? It's just like a universal thing in AA, right? For guys. I don't know about the women. And I met this girl, and I was obsessed with her. I thought, she's amazing. Now, my first sponsor, was never the arbiter of my sex life, except with this girl. The only time. He said, you got to stay away from her. She's really sick. And I looked at him and I said, oh, Dick, we're all sick here. And he's getting this look on his face like he's strapped in for some entertainment. And and I said to him, I think she's my soul. I think she's my soulmate. I think she's God's will. And he just rolls his eyes. Come on. I said, no, listen, you know that I drank, my deal was Richard's Wild Irish Rose wine. She drank Richard's Wild Irish. I mean, I thought, are you so stupid you can't see the kismet in that? I mean, and by the way, it did not turn out well. But my ability to imagine that God's will is my will is this delusional quality in me. I don't know that ever goes away because of my clamoring with self and this ego. You can't kill it. You can push it aside. You can get it out of the driver's seat. You cannot act on it, but it's always there. Dr. Harry Tiebout, a great friend to AA, said that we must have ego reduction in depth. And as I was told in early sobriety, it's not so much I'm turning my will and my life over to God. I got to get it out of the hands of the idiot that's been sticking it to me all these years. And so I try to align my will with God's. And I spend quite a bit of time in the morning. And truthfully, lately, the last 3 years, maybe, I've been a little remiss in the morning. Now I do it. I set the time aside and I do it. But you can do meditation and prayer in the morning and be all in, or you can do it robotically. And it's been more robotic than it has been all in. And I'm not proud of that. I know it's a deficiency, and I'm the only one that suffers from that. Well, and my wife sometimes suffers from it a little bit too. So I try to align my will with God's. One of the greatest things I think that Bill ever gave us, the greatest direction, is this: pause when agitated. That has saved me and people I sponsor from all kinds of trouble. Because if I react when I'm agitated, it's not going to be good. And it took me many years here practicing the pause to realize that what I'm not pausing for is excitement. And excitement, I've made more stupid decisions when I'm excited than I ever have from being anxious or resentful. That I pause when there's a disturbance. It doesn't have to be a bad disturbance, because excitement, I never thought that was a problem, because it always feels good. It always gives my ego a little hope. And I pause when excited, agitated. Bill says something also that's so true for me. I remember talking to my sponsor about this in the first couple of years. He says, we must constantly remind ourselves we're no longer running the show. And I remember saying to him, well, why does it say that? And he says, because you're constantly trying to run the show, and I don't know it. And how do you know that you're playing God if you think you're right? I can imagine I'm doing God's will, when actually I'm just doing mine. I'm imagining that what I want is what God wants. So instead of trying to align my will to God's, I'm fancy that God's come to his senses and has aligned his will with mine. There's a great paragraph in there that's about we don't pray for anything for ourselves. I think one of the great words in Alcoholics Anonymous in the 12 steps is the word only in step 11. I think that tells me more about what we're doing here than anything else. It's about surrender. We pray only for knowledge of God's will for us and the power to carry that out. That is not a common spiritual position. If you look Sunday mornings at the evangelists on television, and some of them are pretty cool, but they encourage people to pray for specifics. And I don't think that, I like what AA says. Clancy and I used to talk about this a lot. He was a real proponent of we pray only for knowledge of God's will for us. When I was a kid, I was in second grade. Still little, second grade. My older cousin told me about the F word. I didn't know what it meant, but I could see that it had power to make the nun's face turn red, power to make my mother very upset. It was like abracadabra. It had actual effect on the physical world. I was amazed, so I said it all the time. I don't know what it means, but I like the effect I'm seeing. And the nun takes me down to the principal's office, the Mother Superior, and they start telling me that I must not use profanity. That's profanity. You must not use it. It breaks the second commandment, and you go to hell. To this day, I'm still thinking, how does that break the second commandment? Not to take the name of the Lord thy God in vain. How is that? And I still, to this day, don't understand how profanity is that. Now, I really avoid profanity, especially in Alcoholics Anonymous. Because, my God, I'd hate to be the person that made someone uncomfortable in here and didn't want to come because I'm cussing a lot. I don't want to be that guy. And what would be the most vainest use of God's name? Wouldn't it be to pray for my will? I mean, is there a vanity greater than that? I mean, God's been running the universe successfully for billions of years, but Bob's here now. And I'm going to instruct God by telling him what to do. Even the Serenity Prayer is one of Clancy and I talk about this all the time. You're instructing God. You say, God, give me serenity. Write this down, God. Give me serenity. Give me wisdom. Give me acceptance. Give me all that stuff. You're telling him what to do. And my friend Mildred turned me on this, and I went and talked to a rabbi about it. The Lord's Prayer may very well be the only prayer, as it once was in the Hebrew prayer prior to Christianity. One of their versions may very well have been the best prayer that's in line with the only. And in one of the pre-Christian versions, I got this from Mildred, it's the second half is different. Now, if you look at the Lord's Prayer, the first half is pretty much aligned with what we do here. Our Father. And if you look in Hebrew, our Father is an image of a man coming home from work, and his young son is standing on the porch about 6 feet above the walk he's walking up to. He has to go up the steps. And as the father gets close to the porch, the young son throws himself into the air because his father is the one that will never let him fall. Our Father who art in heaven. What's heaven? Chuck says it's a new pair of glasses. When I can see you, I have a better chance of seeing God. But I got to clear a lot of me out of the way. That's what the whole resentment inventory is about, the fear inventory. Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. It's just a praise. Hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. And then in the earlier versions, the next couple lines are not asking God or telling God what to do. Like in the Christian version, they've evolved to a point where it says, give us, you're giving him direction, give us this day our daily bread. In the old one, it was just an acknowledgement. You give us. this day our daily bread. And you forgive us our trespasses. And you always have. But as I forgive those who trespass against me. And you lead me not into temptation, but you deliver me from evil. And that is a perfect alignment with the only in step 11. And so Alcoholics Anonymous it's so different. It's not what I think it is. And I'm going to share this for a minute and then I'll be done. I've come to the conclusion from my own experience and the people I sponsor that the main problem I have is that I'm so full of me, I can't access God's grace. God does not withhold it. I block it. And what I have to do here is abandon myself to God. Alcoholics Anonymous is about surrender. Chuck used to talk about that all the time. One of my favorite Chuck Chamberlain talks was in 1971. He was the speaker for Bill Wilson's memorial meeting in Long Beach. There were two memorial meetings. One was in New York. They had somebody talk there. And Chuck was the guy who talked in California. And it's an amazing talk because he talks about the frustration of not being able to find the words to help his buddy who comes out and stays with him often, Bill Wilson, so he could be free of his depression. And isn't that what we're trying to do here? I'm trying to get my life out of my hands. I'm trying to reduce the separation between me and you and me and God. And there's a funny dynamic as I do away with the stuff that stands between me and you, which is my judgments, my opinionation, my entitlement, all that stuff. Not only am I getting more okay and closer to you where I can hang out with you. We're good. But as that happens, God seems to be closer to me. The times in my sobriety where I felt the most connected to God have been when I'm working with someone else. Or you just have that thing happens. It happens. You don't know how it happens. It just happens. You're trying to help this new guy. And he grabs your heart. And you fall in love with him. And then there's a rightness. There's a rightness about everything. Very, very similar to the way I felt in the early days of my drinking when a bottle of whiskey could just make the whole universe just right. And maybe that's what I'm trying to do here. I'm trying to get me out of the way so I can be one with you and one with God. And trusting God is the main piece of business here. It's easy to talk about. It's harder to do when you're afraid. Because my ego likes to worry and scare me. How many of us, and I'll just speak for myself, how many hours, hundreds of hours I've spent in my head trying to solve problems that will never occur. You know, and it feels like I'm playing God. Or in my head having conversations with you that the end result of the conversation in my head is that you realize how wrong you had been and you're properly ashamed of yourself. I used to go to my sponsor and I'm a resentment collector. It's a hobby. And I wait till I got a basket full. I mean, and they're all in AA. Everybody, because I'm a noticer. I notice what's wrong with you. And I go to my sponsor and I dump all this stuff on his desk and this guy's doing this. And he'd say this to me so many times. I didn't get it at first. He said, you got to quit playing God. I think, I'm not playing God. I'm reporting accurate information here. And I was playing God. I was as if I climbed up onto a throne of judgment. And I threw away the decision to give up what I want and my life. In step 3, I've thrown that decision out, and I am playing God. And so Alcoholics Anonymous is trying to take a guy here that feels big and make him small. And today I don't resist it like I used to. I used to gravitate towards things that involve self-gratification, self-grandizement, self. And I may lean in those directions on occasion today, but for the most part, I get up every morning and I ask God to help me to be useful. I've started praying. My wife now does this in some of my sponsees. I started asking many years ago to give me the heart of a servant and give me a generous spirit, because it's not always that way. And if I can ask him for the heart of a servant, what happens is I catch myself from time to time when I'm being self-serving, self-grandizing, me. And I'll catch myself and pause, because that's a type of agitation. So God, I talked a lot for a guy I didn't know what he was going to say. What? I don't know. Thank you for having me here this weekend. I'm not going to talk about that. Thank you.